Captain Jake Morrison stared at the endless black space through the main window of the UES Vigilant. Stars dotted the darkness like tiny diamonds. He had been doing this job for 5 years now, watching the empty space around Earth's solar system. Most days were quiet. Most days, nothing happened. "Captain, I'm getting something on the long-range sensors," said Lisa Carter from her position at the navigation station. She was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and sharp eyes. That never missed anything. Jake walked over to look at her screen. Green dots moved slowly across the display. "What do you think it is?" "Looks like a trade convoy. 3 ships, maybe 4. They're coming from the direction of the Kelani systems." Jake nodded. The Kelani, or one of the few alien races that Earth had good relations with. They were traders, not fighters. They sold Earth rare metals in exchange for art, music, and food. It was a fair deal that helped both sides. "Should we contact them?" asked Pete Rodriguez, the chief engineer. He was an older man with gray hair and hands that were always dirty from working on the ship's engines. "Let them pass," Jake said. "They know the rules. No coming closer than the asteroid belt without permission." Amy Walsh, the communications officer, looked up from her station. "Captain, I'm picking up some strange signals. The Kelani ships are transmitting on emergency frequencies." Jake felt his stomach tighten. Emergency frequencies meant trouble. What kind of signals? "It's hard to tell. The transmission is broken up, like they're having problems with their equipment. But I think they're asking for help." Jake had to make a decision. Earth's policy was clear. Stay neutral in the Galactic War. Don't get involved in alien problems. But the Kelani were friends. They had never caused trouble for Earth. "Pete, how long would it take us to reach them?" "About 6 hours at full speed, Captain." Jake looked at his crew. They were good people. He trusted them with his life every day. Lisa had saved them from an asteroid field last year with her quick thinking. Pete had kept their engines running during a solar storm that should have killed them all. Amy had talked them out of a misunderstanding with some angry Vorthan patrol ships. "Amy, try to contact Earth Command. Tell them we have a possible emergency situation." Amy worked at her controls for several minutes. "I'm getting nothing, Captain." Too much interference from the solar wind. Jake made his choice. "Lisa, set course for the Kelani convoy." "Pete, give me everything the engines can handle." A Vigilant turned and began moving toward the alien ships. Jake felt the familiar vibration of the engines working hard. Through the window, he could see the convoy now, tiny points of light. In the distance dot as they got closer, Jake could see that something was very wrong. The Kelani ships were damaged. Their hulls had holes in them. One ship was barely moving, trailing gas and debris behind it. "Captain, I'm getting a clear signal now," Amy said. "It's Ambassador Thekvara. He's asking for immediate assistance." Jake knew Thekvara. The Kelani had visited Earth many times as part of the trade missions. He was a good alien, as far as Jake could tell. He always treated humans with respect. "Put him through." The main screen flickered and showed the inside of a damaged Kelani ship. Thekvara appeared on the screen. His blue skin was darker than usual, and his large eyes looked scared. Behind him, Jake could see other Kelani working frantically at damaged controls. "Captain Morrison, thank the stars you are here. We need help. Our ships are failing." "What happened to you?" Jake asked. "We were attacked." "Our home world ... double quotes." Thekvara's voice broke. "Our home world is gone." Jake felt cold. "Gone? What do you mean gone?" "Destroyed. Consumed. Everything we knew, everything we built, it is no more. We are all that remains of our people." Lisa gasped. Pete muttered something under his breath. Amy's hands shook as she worked her controls. "Who did this?" Jake asked. Something new. Something terrible. They call themselves the Devourers. They are not like the Vorthan or the Nexus. They are machines, but they think. They learn. And they consume everything. Jake had heard rumors about strange attacks on the outer worlds. Ships disappearing. Planets going silent. But he had thought they were just stories told by scared traders. How many of you are there? 12,000 survivors from a world of 50 million. We have been traveling for 2 months, hiding, running. Our ships are breaking down. We need help. Jake looked at his crew. They were all looking at him, waiting for his decision. Earth's policy was clear. No involvement in alien wars. But these weren't soldiers. These were refugees. These were people who had lost everything. Pete, can we tow their ships? The small one, maybe. The others are too big for our ship. Captain, Amy said quietly, if we help them, we're breaking the neutrality agreement. Jake knew she was right. But he also knew that sometimes doing the right thing meant breaking the rules. Amy, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we have a refugee situation. Tell them we're bringing the Kelani to the outer stations. Yes, sir. Jake looked back at the screen. Ambassador, we're going to help you. Follow us toward Earth. We'll get you to safety. Vekvara's large eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Captain. You may have saved what remains of our people. As the Vigilant began escorting the damaged Kelani ships toward Earth, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. For 30 years, Earth had stayed out of the Galactic War. They had been safe in their little corner of Space Dot, but now the war was coming to them. Jake stood on the bridge, watching the stars, and wondered if humanity was ready for what was coming. The Devourers had destroyed an entire world. What could they do to Earth? He pushed the thought away. His job was to get the refugees to safety. Someone else would have to worry about the bigger questions. But deep down, Jake knew that the time for staying neutral was over. The war had found them, whether they wanted it or not. The space station orbiting Earth buzzed with activity. Dr. Karen Phillips walked through the medical bay, checking on the Kelani refugees. Many of them were hurt, not just in their bodies, but in their hearts. She had never seen such sadness in anyone's eyes, human or alien. Doctor, this one needs help, said Nurse Jenny Brooks, pointing to a young Kelani sitting alone in the corner. The alien was small, maybe a child, with pale blue skin and large eyes that stared at nothing. Karen knelt down beside the young Kelani. Hello, I'm Dr. Phillips. Can you tell me your name? The child looked up at her, but said nothing. Karen had learned some of the Kelani language during the trade missions. She tried speaking in their tongue, but the child just turned away. The youngster has not spoken since the attack, said a voice behind her. Karen turned to see Ambassador Vekvara walking toward them. The alien leader looked tired and old, even though Karen knew the Kelani lived much longer than humans. Ambassador, how are you feeling? My body heals, but my spirit remains broken. Dr. Phillips, I must speak with your leaders. They need to know what is coming. Karen nodded. She had been asking the same questions herself. I'll contact President Brooks. But first, can you tell me more about these Devourers? The more we know, the better we can prepare. Vekvara sat down heavily on one of the medical chairs. They are not like any enemy we have faced. The Vorthan are aggressive, but they can be reasoned with. The Nexus are cold, but they follow logic. The Devourers, they are something else. What do they want? Everything. They consume worlds, break them apart, use the materials to build more ships. They do not negotiate. They do not retreat. They simply consume. Karen felt a chill run down her spine. How many ships do they have? We do not know. Every time we destroy one, 2 more appear. It is as if they can build themselves faster than we can destroy them. 2 days later, Karen found herself in the Global Defense Council chambers on Earth. President Helen Brooks sat at the head of the long table, her face serious. General Frank Davis was there, along with Secretary of State Maria Santos and several other important people. Dr. Phillips, President Brooks said, "Please tell us what you've learned from the refugees." Karen stood up and activated the display screen. Images of the Kelani ships appeared, showing the damage they had suffered. The Devourers use weapons we've never seen before. They can cut through the strongest alien metals, like paper. But that's not the worst part. She clicked to the next image. This is what remains of the Kalani homeworld. The room fell silent. On the screen was a picture of empty space where a planet should have been. Only small pieces of rock floated where a world had once lived. 50 million people, Karen said quietly. Gone in 3 days. General Davis leaned forward. How is that possible? You can't just destroy a planet. They can, said Ambassador Vekvara, who had been invited to speak to the council. They have machines that tear apart the very atoms of matter. They turn planets into raw materials for their fleets. Secretary Santos spoke up. How long before they reach Earth? Based on their movement patterns, perhaps 6 months. Maybe less. The room erupted in worried voices. President Brooks banged her gavel to restore order. Ambassador, what do you suggest we do? You must join the war. The Vorthan and Nexus are putting aside their differences to fight this threat. Earth must help them. General Davis shook his head. We don't have the military strength to fight something like this. Our space fleet is tiny compared to theirs. Then we must build more ships, President Brooks said. How long would that take? Years, Davis replied. We don't have years. Karen had been thinking about this problem for days. Maybe we don't need to fight them the same way the aliens do. Everyone looked at her. What do you mean, Doctor? President Brooks asked. I've been studying the wreckage from the Kelani ships. The Devourer weapons are incredibly advanced, but they're also predictable. They're machines, which means they think like machines. They follow patterns. So maybe we can find a way to use that against them. Humans are good at thinking outside the box. We might be able to come up with solutions that the aliens haven't thought of. Admiral Roy Parker, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. Doctor, with respect, these things destroyed an entire planet. What makes you think we can do better than the aliens? Karen smiled. Because we're different. The Vorthan think like warriors. The Nexus think like computers. The Kelani think like traders. But humans ... we think like survivors. 3 weeks later, work began on what would become known as the Lazarus Protocol. Karen led a team of scientists from around the world, working with Kelani refugees who had technical knowledge. They set up their main laboratory in an underground facility in the Sahara Desert. The work was difficult. Human technology was centuries behind the aliens in many ways. But Karen had an idea. Instead of trying to match the Devourer's advanced weapons, they would try to understand how the machines thought. Look at this, said Dr. Bob Taylor, one of the engineers working on the project. He showed Karen a computer simulation. The Devourers don't just attack randomly. They have a system. First, they send scout ships to gather information. Then they bring in the harvester machines. Finally, they move the whole fleet to consume the planet. That's their weakness, Karen said. They're efficient, but they're also predictable. If we can disrupt their system at the right moment, we might be able to stop them, Bob finished. Meanwhile, Captain Jake Morrison was back in space, this time leading a small fleet of Earth's patrol ships. They had been reinforced with some Kelani weapons and defensive systems. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Captain, I'm detecting movement at the edge of the system, Lisa Carter reported. 3 ships coming in fast. Jake felt his heart rate increase. Are they devourers? Unknown. They're not broadcasting any identification signals. All ships, battle stations. Amy, try to contact them. The 3 ships continued toward them, moving faster than any human ship could go. Jake could see them. Now on the main screen, dark shapes against the stars. No response to our signals, Captain, Amy reported. They're not slowing down, Pete said. Whatever they want, they're not here to talk. Jake made his decision. All ships opened fire. The small Earth fleet launched everything they had. Missiles streaked through space toward the alien ships. Most of them were destroyed by defensive systems, but a few got through. One of the alien ships exploded in a ball of fire. The other 2 kept coming. They're targeting us, Lisa said. Brace for impact. The alien weapons hit the Vigilant like a hammer. The ship shook and lights flickered. Jake could smell smoke and burning electronics. Hull. Breach on Deck 3, Pete reported. We're losing atmosphere. Can we retreat? Not at this speed. They're faster than us. Jake looked at his crew. They had been through so much together. He couldn't let them die here. All ships ram them. It's the only way. Captain, no, Amy said, but Jake had already made his choice. He pushed the engines to full power and aimed the Vigilant at the nearest alien ship. The other Earth ships followed his lead. The collision was massive. Both ships exploded in a burst of light that could be seen from Earth. The 3rd alien ship, damaged by the explosion, limped away into deep space. In the underground laboratory, Karen felt the ground shake as the explosion lit up the sky. She knew what it meant. The Devourers had found them. The war had begun. President Helen Brooks stood in the emergency session of the Global Defense Council, her face pale but determined. The attack on Captain Morrison's fleet had changed everything. Earth could no longer pretend the war would pass them by. The time for neutrality is over, she announced to the room full of world leaders. We need allies, and we need them now. General Frank Davis pulled up a star map on the main screen. Madam President, our intelligence suggests the Vorthan Empire has a Morth battle fleet 2 days from Earth. The Nexus Coalition has ships in the outer regions of our solar system. Are they here to help us or conquer us? Asked Secretary Santos. That depends on what we offer them, Brooks replied. Commander Mitchell, are you ready for your mission? Commander Steve Mitchell stood up. He was a career diplomat who had spent years learning alien languages and customs. Yes, Madam President, the U's Horizon is ready to depart. We'll make contact with both factions. 2 days later, Steve found himself aboard a Vorthan warship that was 10 times the size of any human vessel. The walls were covered with weapons and battle decorations. Everything was designed to intimidate. War leader Gex was a massive alien, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with thick armor-like skin and 4 arms. His voice sounded like grinding metal when he spoke. So, the humans finally wish to join the war, Gex said. What can you soft creatures offer that we cannot provide ourselves? Steve had prepared for this moment. We offer something you've never had before. We offer hope. Gex laughed, a sound like breaking rocks. Hope? My warriors do not need hope. They need weapons and strength. Your warriors are dying, Steve said calmly. Your empire is falling back on every front. You've lost 12 worlds in the past 6 months. How many more can you afford to lose? The laughter stopped. Gex's 4 eyes focused on Steve with deadly intensity. You dare speak to me of loss, human? I speak of reality. The Devourers are winning because you're fighting them the same way you fight each other. But they're not like you. They don't have pride or anger or fear. They're machines, and machines can be beaten if you know how. Meanwhile, Major Kelly Thompson was having her own difficult conversation aboard a Nexus ship. The Nexus were very different from the Vorthen. They were tall and thin, with pale skin and large heads. They spoke in perfect unison, as if they shared one mind. "The human proposal is interesting," said the Nexus collective mind called Zara 9. "However, your species lacks the technological advancement necessary for meaningful contribution to the war effort." Kelly had expected this response. "Our technology may be primitive, but our thinking is not. We've studied the Devourer attack patterns. We believe we found a weakness." "Explain." Kelly activated a small holographic projector. "The Devourers coordinate their attacks through a network of command ships. If we can disrupt that network during a large harvesting operation, their entire fleet becomes vulnerable. This theory has been considered. The command ships are too well protected. Not if we attack them from the inside." The Nexus collective paused. Kelly could almost hear them thinking, communicating with each other in ways humans couldn't understand. "Elaborate." "Back on Earth, Dr. Karen Phillips was working around the clock in the desert laboratory. The Kelani refugees had provided crucial information about Devourer technology, but creating a weapon that could actually stop them was proving nearly impossible. "Doctor, I think I've found something," said Dr. Bob Taylor, looking up from his computer. "The Devourers use a form of quantum communication to coordinate their fleets. If we could create a virus that attacks their quantum network, it would spread throughout their entire fleet," Karen finished. "But we don't have quantum communication technology." "No, but the Nexus do. And the Vorthen have quantum disruptors. That could deliver the virus." Karen felt a spark of hope. "We'd need all three technologies working together. Human virus design, Nexus quantum communication, and Vorthen weapon systems. That's never been done before. The aliens don't share technology. Then we'll have to convince them that their survival depends on it." The breakthrough came when Lieutenant Dan Cooper, head of security for the laboratory, captured a Devourer infiltrator unit. The machine was small, about the size of a dog, but incredibly sophisticated. "It was trying to access our computer systems," Dan reported. "But look at this." He showed Karen a damaged circuit board from the machine. "It's not just trying to steal information. It's trying to learn how we think." Karen examined the circuit board under a microscope. "It's a learning algorithm. The Devourers are studying us, trying to understand human logic patterns." "Is that bad?" "It could be. Or it could be exactly what we need." Karen's mind raced with possibilities. If they're trying to understand us, that means they don't understand us yet. We're still unpredictable to them. Word of the discovery reached the diplomatic missions. Commander Mitchell used it to convince war leader Gex that humans could offer something unique in the war. "Your people fight with honor and strength," Mitchell said. "The Nexus fight with logic and precision. But humans fight with chaos and creativity. We do things that don't make sense to machines." Gex considered this. "Show me." Mitchell activated a recording of the battle where Captain Morrison had sacrificed his ship to destroy the Devourer scouts. A logical commander would have retreated to preserve his forces. Captain Morrison chose to attack, even though it meant certain death. The Devourers couldn't predict that choice. Interesting. But one act of bravery does not win a war. No, but 1,000 acts of unpredictability might. Major Thompson was making similar arguments to the Nexus Collective. Our chaotic thinking patterns could be exactly what you need to disrupt their network. Machines expect logical responses. Humans specialize in illogical ones. The proposal has merit, Zara 9 admitted. However, combining our technologies would require unprecedented cooperation. Then, let's do something unprecedented. The first joint operation was a disaster. Human, Vorthen, and Nexus technologies were completely incompatible. The quantum virus worked in theory, but couldn't be deployed effectively. The Vorthan weapons were too crude for precision work. The Nexus systems were too complex for humans to operate. "It's not working," Bob Taylor reported after the third failed test. "The technologies are too different." Karen refused to give up. "Then we don't combine the technologies. We combine the people." She proposed something revolutionary: integrated crews. Human creativity, Vorthan strength, and Nexus logic working together on the same ships. The aliens were horrified. "Impossible," Gex declared. "My warriors cannot work with machine lovers and weak humans." "Unacceptable," Zaranine added. "Biological entities introduce chaos into precise operations." "Exactly," Karen said. "Chaos is what we need." The debate continued for days. Meanwhile, long-range sensors detected the approach of a massive devourer. Fleet, 3,000 ships, led by planet-sized harvester platforms. They would reach Earth in less than a month. President Brooks made the final decision. "We're out of time for debate. Either we work together, or we all die separately." The first mixed crew was assembled on the U's horizon. Commander Mitchell remained in overall command, but his crew now included Vorthan warriors and Nexus technicians. The ship itself was upgraded with alien technology. "This is either going to work brilliantly or fail spectacularly," Mitchell said. As they departed for their first mission, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Martinez, a former police officer who had been recruited for the operation, grinned. "In my experience, the best plans always sound crazy at first." Their mission was to test the integrated approach against a small devourer force that had been detected near Jupiter. If they succeeded, it would prove that the alliance could work. If they failed, "Let's not think about failing," Mitchell said. As they approached the enemy ship's dot, the battle was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Human unpredictability, Vorthan aggression, and Nexus precision created a fighting style that confused the devourers. The machines kept trying to analyze and predict the Allies' moves, but the combination of three different thinking patterns made prediction impossible. "They're hesitating," reported the Nexus technician. "Their response time is increasing." "That's our chance," Mitchell said. "Tony, you're the tactics expert. What do we do?" Tony had been studying the battle patterns. "In police work, when you're dealing with someone who's trying to outthink you, you stop thinking and start reacting. We need to be pure instinct." "Instinct is not logical," the Nexus officer protested. "Exactly. That's why it'll work." The battle ended with all three devourer ships destroyed and the horizon barely damaged. As they returned to Earth, Mitchell felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Hope. The alliance was working. Now they just had to scale it up to face 3,000 ships. "No pressure," Tony said with a smile. Mitchell smiled back. "None at all." The devourer fleet arrived like a storm of metal and death. 3,000 ships emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, their dark hulls blocking out the stars. At the center of the fleet were the harvester platforms, each one the size of a small moon. Admiral Roy Parker stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, Earth's new flagship. Around him, the Allied fleet prepared for battle. Human ships worked alongside Vorthan war vessels and Nexus cruisers. It was the largest space fleet in human history, but it still seemed tiny compared to the enemy. "All ships, this is Admiral Parker. Today we fight not just for Earth, but for every living thing in the galaxy. The devourers think they can consume. Use like they consume the others. Let's show them they're wrong." The first battle took place near Jupiter. Captain Lisa Carter, now commanding her own ship, led a squadron of fast attack vessels. Her job was to slow down the enemy advance and buy time for the main fleet to get into position. "They're not responding to our attacks the way they used to," reported her tactical officer. "They're adapting faster than before." Lisa wasn't surprised. The Devourers were learning machines. Every battle taught them something new about human tactics, but humans were learning too. Switch to pattern 7, she ordered. Random attack vectors, no coordination between ships. That's not standard procedure. The Devourers study standard procedures. Give them something they can't predict. The human ships began attacking in ways that made no sense to military minds. One ship would charge straight at the enemy, while another would circle around and attack from behind. A third would stop completely and wait for the enemy to come to it. The Devourers' response time began to slow. Their coordination became confused. They were trying to analyze patterns that didn't exist. It's working, Lisa said with satisfaction. They can't predict chaos, but the victory was short-lived. More Devourer ships kept coming, and the human fleet was running out of ammunition and fuel. Lisa's squadron fell back toward Earth, fighting. A running battle all the way. On Earth, President Brooks watched the battle from the command center deep underground. The planet was preparing for the worst. Cities were being evacuated. Children were being moved to shelters. Everyone knew that if the fleet failed, Earth would be next. "How long can our ships hold out?" she asked General Davis. "Maybe 6 hours. After that, the Devourers will reach Earth's orbit." "And the Lazarus Protocol?" "Dr. Phillips says she needs at least 12 hours to finish the weapon." Brooks felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. "Then we need to buy her that time." In the desert laboratory, Karen Phillips worked frantically with her team. The weapon was almost ready, but it was incredibly complex. It required precise timing and coordination between human, Vorthan, and Nexus systems. "Doctor, we're getting reports of enemy infiltrators," said Lieutenant Dan Cooper. "They're trying to break into the facility." Karen looked up from her work. "How many?" "Maybe a dozen small units. We can handle them, but if they get inside, they can't get inside. This weapon is the only chance we have." Dan nodded grimly. "My team won't let them through." The battle for the laboratory was fierce but brief. The Devourer infiltrators were more advanced than the ones they had captured before. They moved like liquid metal, changing shape to slip through cracks and under doors. But Dan's security team was ready. They had studied the captured infiltrator and knew the machine's weaknesses. Electromagnetic pulses could disrupt their systems. High-temperature weapons could melt their adaptive armor. "They're retreating," Dan reported. "But they'll be back. With more units. How long do we have?" "Maybe an hour." Karen felt panic rising in her chest. The weapon needed at least 3 hours to complete. But then she had an idea. "Dan, what if we don't wait for them to come to us? What if we take the fight to them?" "You mean leave the laboratory?" "The weapon is portable. We can move it to a ship and complete the work in space." It was incredibly risky. If something went wrong during the move, the weapon could be destroyed. But if they stayed, the Devourers would eventually break through the defenses. "Do it," Karen decided. Meanwhile, in space, the battle was going badly. The Allied fleet had been pushed back to Earth's orbit. The moon was under attack by Devourer harvester platforms. Humanity watched in horror as their ancient companion began to be consumed. Captain Tony Martinez commanded a mixed crew aboard the UES Resistance. His ship was a strange combination of human, Vorthan, and Nexus technologies. It shouldn't have worked, but somehow it did. "Captain, the enemy is focusing on the moon," reported his Nexus navigator. "They appear to be using it as a source of raw materials. Can we stop them?" "The harvester platforms are too large and too well defended. A direct assault would be suicide." Tony had been a police officer before the war. He knew that sometimes you couldn't stop a crime, but you could make it too expensive for the criminal to continue. "What if we don't attack the platforms? What if we attack their supply lines?" His Vorthan weapons officer, a warrior named Keth, understood immediately. Hit the transport ships carrying materials from the moon to the construction ships. Exactly. Make them work for every piece of metal they steal. The plan worked better than Tony had hoped. The Devourers were used to overwhelming resistance with sheer numbers. They weren't prepared for guerrilla warfare. Small groups of allied ships would attack the transport convoys, destroy what they could, and disappear before the enemy could respond. But it was only a delaying tactic. The moon was still being consumed, and more Devourer ships kept arriving. On Earth, Nancy Green was organizing the evacuation of New York City. She had been a school teacher before the war, but now she was responsible for moving millions of people to safety. The transport ships are ready, reported her assistant. But we don't have enough fuel to get everyone out. Then we'll have to make choices, Nancy said, her heart breaking. Children and elderly first. Essential personnel last. What about the rest? Nancy looked out at the city where she had lived her entire life. We'll have to hope the fleet can protect them. In the industrial centers, Bob Taylor was overseeing the conversion of Earth's factories to military production. Every piece of equipment that could be turned into a weapon was being modified. Every person who could hold a tool was working 18-hour shifts. We're producing ammunition faster than we ever have, he reported to the president. But it's still not enough. What about the civilian volunteers? They're doing amazing work. People are giving up their personal belongings to be melted down for metal. Kids are collecting scrap. Everyone wants to help. It was humanity's finest hour, and potentially its last. As the battle raged in space, the people of Earth showed what they were truly made of. Not advanced technology or superior weapons, but courage and determination. The turning point came when Dr. Phillips successfully moved the Lazarus protocol to a ship in orbit. The weapon was finally ready, but it could only be used once. If it failed, there would be no second chance. Admiral Parker, this is Dr. Phillips. The weapon is ready for deployment. What do you need from us, Doctor? Get me close to the enemy. Command ship. The weapon has to be delivered manually. Parker felt his blood run cold. That's a suicide mission. Maybe, but it's the only way. Captain Lisa Carter volunteered to pilot the mission. I know those ships better than anyone. I can get you close. As the small ship approached the massive Devourer command vessel, Karen watched the battle raging around them. Human ships were falling like leaves in a storm. The moon was half consumed. Earth itself was beginning to be attacked. Doctor, we're in position, Lisa reported. But we're not going to make it out of here. Karen looked at the weapon she had spent months building. It was small, about the size of a briefcase, but it contained the hopes of every living thing in the galaxy. Then we'll have to make sure it works. She armed the device and began the activation sequence. Outside, the Devourer command ship loomed like a metal mountain. In a few seconds, they would know if humanity's last hope was enough. The weapon activated, with a pulse of energy that could be seen from Earth. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the Devourer ships began to shut down. The machines that had consumed countless worlds were finally silent, but the battle was far from over. The Devourers had backup systems, and they were already beginning to adapt. Humanity had won a victory, but the war was still raging. As Karen watched the enemy fleet trying to recover, she realized that the real battle was just beginning. The silence lasted for exactly 47 seconds. Then the Devourer ships began to wake up again. They're adapting to the weapon, Dr. Karen Phillips reported from the bridge of Lisa Carter's ship. The quantum virus is working, but they're developing immunity faster than we expected. Admiral Parker's voice cracked.